Shalom, everyone. This is Rabbi Alan. I have a question. And the question comes from a 2009 article in Moment magazine. Moment magazine is a very traditional Jewish magazine. And so in 2009, they had an article. And the headline of the article was, "When is a Haggadah not Jewish?" And right away in the article, when they wrote about it, their answer was, when Jesus is more in the Haggadah than a matzah has holes. And they were referring to the fact that there were some messianic Haggadahs that were coming out. And they were saying that they weren't really kosher, weren't really valid. Well, that year I responded to that by doing a message both at the synagogue, and I included it in my Passover message that year. And I said, I have a question. And my question is, when is the Haggadah messianic? Actually, I said, when is any Haggadah messianic? Meaning any Haggadah around the world from any sect of Judaism, written and read in any synagogue, when is any Haggadah messianic? And the answer was, when you read it. And that's the truth. Every Haggadah is messianic. You don't have to twist it and turn it. You don't have to contrive it. You don't have to force the issues. Every Haggadah is messianic when you show people how messianic it really is. And so that's what I want to talk about just for a few minutes during my video today. Now, I'm not going to read the entire Haggadah, but I'm going to point out some portions of the Haggadah just to show you how messianic it really is. And not only messianic, it just doesn't speak of the Messiah, but it specifically shows us that Yeshua is the Messiah that it was written about in the Haggadah. Now, this is my low tech here. Every year for about 34 years, I've been giving a Passover Seder, even before I started called Mashiach Messianic Synagogue. And this is the Haggadah that I've been using over the years. It is the deluxe edition of the Passover Haggadah, and it is brought to you by Maxwell House Coffee, and it says that it's kosher for Passover. And the reason it is kosher because they had a panel of Orthodox rabbis when they first wrote this Haggadah. They had them put this together for Maxwell House to use. So this is basically an Orthodox Haggadah. Now we use a sort of a newer version that's it's color, but it's the same exact print inside, the same exact text inside. And so let's look at it today. The order of the Seder every year and the order in the Haggadah tells the story of Passover. And we get this opportunity to tell about the story of the Exodus and how we were freed by the blood of the Lamb and how we make our way into the Promised Land. And there are the elements of Passover that we explain, and we explain the bitter herbs and the unleavened bread, the matzah, and we explain the Passover lamb, the roasted lamb. And then the next thing that we do in the Passover Seder is we take the middle matzah of the three stacked up matzahs. We take the middle matzah and we break it in half. We wrap it in a white linen cloth or napkin, and then we hide it away somewhere. And then at the end of the meal later on, the children look for it, and whoever finds that broken piece of matzah gets a reward or a prize. That broken piece of matzah is called the afikomen. Now, the afikomen, in the Talmud, they explain that they say that the afikomen means dessert. It is a Greek word. They say it's a Greek word. As a matter of fact, afikomen is the only Greek word that we find in the Haggadah. And for that reason, the traditional rabbis say that somehow the Afikomen got into the Passover Seder sometime around the 1st or 2nd centuries. And they say, so it must mean dessert because we eat it right at the end of the meal. And according to halakha, in traditional Judaism, they say that you are to eat nothing after the meal except the afikomen, and after the afikomen, you're not supposed to eat anything. So when people have asked, well, why are there 3 matzahs stacked up? The traditional rabbis have answered by saying, they have a couple of answers, they're not really quite sure, but they've given some possible answers, and one of them is that the 3 matzahs represent Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so, of course, the question to me is, then why is the middle matzah, the Isaac, broken, and not the Abraham or Jacob matzah broken and wrapped and hidden? Their other possible explanation is that the 3 matzahs represent Moses, the priests, and the people of Israel. Then, of course, the question is, then why is it that the priest matzah is broken and not the Moses matzah or the people of Israel matzah? But it is always the middle matzah. And so we then have the... After we do that, let me mention that there is sort of a very good hint that we have in the Brit Hadashah in the New Testament, and it comes from 1 Corinthians 11:24, and it's Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, who was known as the Pharisee of Pharisees before he accepted Yeshua as his Messiah. He wrote to the Corinthians and he said, when Yeshua had given thanks, he broke the matzah and he said, take it and eat it. This is my body and it's broken for you, and do it in remembrance of me. That's the first record that we have of that matzah being broken in the Passover Seder. So then the next thing that we do in the Seder is we have our special Passover meal. At the end of the meal, the children have an opportunity to go and look for the afikomen, and like I said, whoever finds it, they get a prize or a reward. Then in the order of the Seder and in the order of the Haggadah, the Messiah is presented in the Haggadah. Let me just quickly read the first portion that we start reading about the Messiah in the Haggadah. It's low tech, people. It's low tech. Okay. So this is what the Haggadah says. It says, our God, the God of our fathers, may he be pleased to grant that our remembrance and the remembrance of our fathers and the remembrance of Messiah, the son of David. And so this is when the Messiah first comes into play into our Passover Seder. And then almost immediately after that, Elijah, the prophet, is brought up. And then we read in the Haggadah, it says, and may he who is most merciful send us Elijah, the prophet of blessed memory, to bring us the good tidings of salvation and consolation. And if we read in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, the last book of the Old Testament, in the book of Malachi, he wrote the words of God, and he said, God said, behold, I will send Elijah before the coming of Messiah. And so we see Elijah is coming in, the Messiah is coming into the Passover Seder, because Elijah is the one that's going to announce the Messiah to the world. And then before we get to the third cup of the Passover Seder, And we do this all around the world at every Passover Seder. We get this opportunity to sing the song Eliyahu Hanavi, now that Eliyahu, Elijah, has been introduced into the Seder. And we sing Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu HaGiladi, Bimrema, Beyomeru Yavo Eleinu, Im Mashiach ben David, Im Mashiach ben David. And in English, it means Elijah the prophet, Elijah the Tishbite, Elijah the Gileadite, may he come speedily in our lifetime with the Messiah, the son of David. Why? Because the book of Malachi says that Elijah is going to announce the coming of Messiah. And then we read at the ending of the Seder that we will read the great Hallels. They are a collection of the Psalms, Psalm 118 through Psalm 136, and we read those Psalms right at the end of the Passover Seder. Now, if we go to the New Testament, the Brit Hadashah, we see recorded that we look at Yeshua's last Passover before he dies, commonly known as the Last Supper, but it is in fact his last Seder. And at that Seder, Yeshua raised the third cup of the four cups, and he took that cup and he broke the matzah, and he said, as he said in 1 Corinthians, this is my body broken for you, and it's done for the redemption of sins. And then he picks up the third cup of wine and he says, this wine, this red wine, represents the blood of the new covenant, and my blood is being shed for you for the redemption of sin. And then they drank that cup. And then the New Testament goes on to then say, and all the disciples went out into the field, and they walked towards the Mount of Olives, and they sang a hymn. So what they were doing was, as would be done at the end of a Seder, they would be reading or singing the Psalms. And so that was one of the hymns that is recorded that they sang. So what we're seeing here is our traditional Haggadah speaks of Messiah, the coming of Messiah, announced by Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet. And then we get to see specifically that it all lines up with Messiah Yeshua's last Passover Seder. So let's remember every Haggadah that you ever read from today on. Think about the truth and the reality of the fact is that Yeshua is the long-awaited Messiah. And if you accept him and find that afikomen, you will get the greatest reward and prize that you could ever get. You would get your sins atoned for, and you will receive everlasting life. So that's it for this week. This is Rabbi Alan. By the way, some of you are seeing this on YouTube. We have our new YouTube channel. The channel's called Rabbi on the Fly. If you like it, please, and you can share it, and you can subscribe to it. If you're looking at this on Facebook, share it with friends and follow us on Facebook. So for now, shalom.